a new book where all books can be acquired, written by Ian O'Connor, Coach K, the rise and reign of Mike Krzyzewski, the author, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Ian O'Connor back again. How you doing, Ian?
Good, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Congrats you bet. Congrats on yet another must-read for the sports fan near you.
Thank you.
You bet. So you did not get Coach K's participation, but a bunch of people participated, I imagine, because they had to check with him first. Is that the way that works in this one for you?
He said, Rich, that he would not block anybody, and he actually spoke about this yesterday at a press conference, and he didn't. When I did the Belichick book, Bill did try to block everybody. so that was a little bit more of a challenging process, and I think the Patriots are a little more secretive than Duke. I would say the Patriots are the Kremlin and Duke is the CIA, I guess. But
okay.
No, yeah, he didn't grant any interviews. I believe he wants to do his own book in retirement, so why should he give Ian O'Connor his stories for free without editorial control? And frankly, I don't have a good answer to that question.
Right.
So I don't necessarily blame him for that, but it was nice of him to not block anybody else. So I had access to his best friends, his closest assistants and aides and players over the years. And actually, Duke did help facilitate some interviews. So I was appreciative of that.
Okay, so what did you learn about Coach Mike Krzyzewski that you did not know going in? Obviously, his story has been well chronicled from, Army and Bob Knight being his coach all the way to the present day. What did you learn here?
Well, let me start with something I learned more than 20 years ago, and you may have experienced this, Rich. I don't know how many viewers and listeners have, but sitting near the Duke bench right behind it for the first time in '99, the Sweet 16 game in the Meadowlands in New Jersey against Steve Alford and Southwest Missouri State. For 2 hours and 15 minutes, it was the most profane. I mean, I just couldn't believe the profanity out of his mouth. He's by far the most profane coach I've ever been around. And I wasn't offended morally or anything because I curse a decent amount. I was entertained. But I mean, everyone from the refs to his own players to his assistant coaches, he blasted Quinn Snyder profanely a couple of times, who was an assistant at the time with Duke. And so it was amusing, but a lot of people have lived that experience for the first time and then have decided never to sit next to the Duke bench ever again. So there are a lot of grandmothers in America who love this guy. If they actually sat next to that bench, they would be pretty mortified. But as far as after talking to hundreds of people for this book, I think the one thing that stands out to me as a surprise is when I ask players how important the pristine or relatively pristine perception of the Duke program as the last shining city on the corrupt hill that is major college athletics is, how important is that to Mike? And to a man, the player said, yeah, he cares about that, but really it's nothing close to winning. All he cares about is beating you that day, whoever you are. And I thought it'd be more of a 50-50 split, but all the players said that really, yeah, it's nice to have that image as a relatively clean program and doing it the right way. But at the end of the day, all Mike cares about is beating you. And I think that's why he has nearly 1,200 victories. It's having that philosophy about the game and about life.
And the number of players that he has turned out from Duke into the professional ranks, Ian O'Connor, are too many to mention, and certainly some of the greats of all time. And then the personalities that he has had to manage collegiately, but also at the Olympic level, is quite something. And that's a story that I saw in an excerpt, as well as on your Twitter account, that I'd love to recount here, was when he was in the Beijing Games in '08, and a young LeBron James demanded Coach K to rectify whatever was going on with Kobe Bryant, and between the two of them, I give you the floor on this one, Ian.
Well, Rich, yeah, Kobe was taking some Laker shots that weren't very team-centric, and it had built up a little bit over time. Players started to grumble about it. And so the last preliminary game in Shanghai against Australia, he took a couple, not too many, but LeBron had hit the breaking point with it. And Coach K was all about accountability, shared accountability within that team. So he held LeBron accountable on some things. So LeBron decided, you know what, I'm going to hold Krzyzewski accountable on this. So he passes by him near the Team USA bench, and according to someone who heard it directly, he said, yo, coach, you better fix that mother blank. And, of course, he was talking about Kobe Bryant. So now Krzyzewski has to deal with this, and he wants no part of it. As a college coach, his first Olympic Games, he does not want to rebuke the great Kobe Bryant, but he has to. And he has to show LeBron that he's willing to do that. So the next day, with trepidation, he approached Kobe, and he took him into a side room. He opened up his laptop, and I don't know, maybe he had 6 or 7 shots on there, and he told Kobe, these are BS shots. You can't do this. You could do this with the Lakers, but you can't take these shots when LeBron and Melo and Kidd and these other guys are your teammates. These are the best players in the world, so they don't deserve that. And so we need you to make this change in approach. So Kobe looked at him, and I don't have the book page in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically said, okay, it won't happen again, coach. And that was the end of the meeting, and it didn't happen again. And Kobe bailed them out against Spain in the gold medal game, and actually with a couple of acrobatic shots. So it's kind of interesting the way it played out. But Krzyzewski, and then Krzyzewski let LeBron know, hey, I took care of it. So you see LeBron holding Coach K accountable, Coach K holding Kobe accountable, and they won their first of 2 gold medals together as a group. And then, of course, Coach K went on to win a third in Rio.
What's in your book, if you don't mind, about Coach K kicking the tires on the NBA and why he never went? What'd you find out?
Well, and he thought seriously about the Celtics in '90. I think he got the sense that he hadn't won the big one yet, and he wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. He was Marv Levy before there was Marv Levy, losing the big one, and so he hadn't won the national title yet. He also sensed that Dave Gavitt wanted him, and Red Auerbach wasn't sure about hiring a college coach. And then in 2004, Kobe really recruited him to coach the Lakers. He took that very seriously. I would say that was probably, Rich, the closest he came to actually leaving Duke. But as it turned out, by staying, he got the best of both worlds. He got to control winning more, as you can in college, because when you win in college, you get the best players to still come to you. In the NBA, when you win, you pick last in the draft. So he got that, he kept that, and then he also got a chance to coach the best NBA players in the world at 3 Olympic Games. So really it worked out perfectly for him. And actually that Olympic experience changed him and inspired him to gravitate more towards the one-and-done players. After Beijing, he changed. All of a sudden he went after John Wall. Kentucky got him, okay. Then he gets Kyrie Irving. He gets Austin Rivers, who was a slam dunk one-and-done at the time. He gets Jabari Parker. So that Olympic experience and coming home back to Duke, telling himself, I really just want to coach the best players in the world at that level, that really inspired him to embrace one and done.
What did you discover about his relationship, whatever it might have been, with Dean Smith when that rivalry between Duke and North Carolina certainly got a jolt of adrenaline? What do you think?
Yeah, he had a better relationship, a closer relationship with Roy Williams. Dean Smith was so established when Mike arrived.
Right.
He needed to try to fight that and just fight for his place in that world, in his backyard. And so they were never really friendly. I think near the end of Dean Smith's life, they came together some, but he had a better relationship with Roy Williams. And because Roy was at a different stage in his career when he got the Carolina job, and so was Mike. But Dean Smith, he certainly had great respect for what he accomplished. But the first time they ever coached against each other, it was in the final seconds of a game that Carolina basically had won, and Dean Smith went over to shake his hand. And Mike wouldn't shake it. He said, the game's not over, Dean. And Roy Williams watched that and said, you know what, this guy is going to be difficult to deal with. and Roy meant that as a compliment.
Yes, no, I know.
You know what?
Yeah.
Don't do that to a legend like Dean Smith, your first time out. Then he said, you know what, Mike's right, the game wasn't over. And now we're going to have to deal with this guy. And they certainly did.
So Dean didn't go up to him with his finger pointing and saying, I'm not going to forget that? That didn't happen? That didn't happen?
They had another thing later on where Dean was mad. He punched the scorer's table, and he added 20 points to the Carolina score total by accident. And Krzyzewski flipped out about that, and he railed about a double standard in the ACC, one for Dean Smith.
Right, I remember that.
Of course, and now it's the Duke double standard. So Krzyzewski benefited from that years later.
That is, I do remember that. I remember when he was complaining that, Dean Smith, like if I had done it, there'd be a big problem, right? And then I do remember that, a double standard. And now here's Coach K, in his final year. So how do you think he's approaching the next 6 weeks?
Well, hey, one note to add to that. Roy Williams did tell me after the Olympic experience, he got more phone calls from coaches complaining about the recruiting advantage that Mike Krzyzewski was getting by coaching Team USA than he could count. He said it was a crazy amount of people. I don't know why they called me to complain about it, because I'm the one who's paying the price for it more than anybody. But he did make that observation. I think, hey, Duke has a chance to win the whole thing. Paolo Banchero has to carry them. He's got to get more aggressive. And obviously, if he goes out the way John Wooden did, that would be a fairy tale ending to an iconic career. And then he rides off into the sunset. I think he will still be fairly involved in this program with John Shire as head coach. He's not a man with many hobbies. He doesn't play golf like Roy Williams. He does a little gardening, and he's not a big reader. So I think he's going to keep his office at Duke, and I think he's going to be involved in the basketball program.
Okay, that's cool. Before I let you go, so you've written books about Coach K now, in theory, where books can be acquired right now. Belichick, Jeter, right? Arnie and Jack, you wrote about them, correct? Is there any through line between these champions that you've noticed? Any particular trait that you've noticed in everybody that you've kind of done a story on or you've done a book on, Ian O'Connor?
The obvious, I guess, is competitive. There's a competitive arrogance in there that they have. I mean, beyond work ethic, attention to detail, and all those things, that just an unbending belief in themselves that they could get it done. And I think it's best captured by, I was at the Leitner game when Duke beat Kentucky in '92 in the Philly Spectrum, and that's probably the greatest play in college basketball history. And I was sitting courtside for that. After the game in the press conference, I asked Mike Krzyzewski, what did you tell your team in that final huddle before Grant Hill threw the ball to Leitner with 2.1 seconds left? Mm-hmm. And he said, we're going to win the game. And he made them believe that. On the way back to the huddle, some players told me they were thinking about the beach and playing golf, and the season was over. They were one and done. They won the national title in '91. Now we're not going to repeat. The season's over. And in that huddle, he got them to believe they could actually win the game, and they did it. So I think that's what separates the greats of the great from really everyone else. You could say the same thing about Tiger and obviously Jordan, people I have not done biographies on, but Tom Brady. They're serial killers, and I think that the people I've written about here have that quality, competitive arrogance.
Competitive arrogance. Write that down for a fantasy football team name. That's a very good one. Competitive arrogance. And we have a whole bunch of avatar possibilities with all the books that you've written. Ian O'Connor, I appreciate the time. Before I let you go, how do you think Belichick is taking, seeing his name in a lawsuit with Brian Flores and his text to Flores that was meant it was meant for Flores. He just forgot. I guess he hit the wrong Brian in his contact list.
Right. It was meant for Dable. Right. And so I think he's kicking himself over making a pretty bad and careless mistake. I do think Flores is the right guy to lead that cause. It's obviously a major problem.
Right.
The Rooney Rule doesn't work at all. But yes, I think that he has kicked himself every day since he sent that text to the wrong Bryant.
No, I know that. I'm just wondering what he thinks about being involved in this lawsuit with that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's unsettling. And really, I mean, Bill deserves credit. He's the one who molded Flores into a good NFL head coach who never deserved to be fired in the first place. Bill raised him in the system and really shaped him into a great defensive coach who held the high-scoring Rams to 3 points in a Super Bowl as the lead defensive coach on that staff. So to be involved in this mess and Brian Flores to be a part of it, and Bill looks like one of the villains when it's really questionable whether or not that should be the case.
Right.
I think it's a tough one for him.
No, I mean, and I don't. It's unfortunate if he's viewed as a villain. I mean, he just reached out to a colleague who he wanted to congratulate, and he sent it to the wrong Brian. I honestly think he meant Flores, and then and then he realized it was a different Brian that he should have been sending it to. I don't know, but it's a terribly unfortunate send, that's for sure. Ian, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rich.
You got it. It's Ian O'Connor, everybody. Go buy his book about Coach K, the rise and reign of Mike Krzyzewski. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.